as far as the racing genre of gaming is concerned, this is something that I kind of believe holds some truth to it because you look at some of the games that came out from this decade, it would be hard to dispute the fact that the 2000s may very well have been the golden era of the racing genre of gaming. And as far as that assertion is concerned, you look at the games that came out during that decade, such as Gran Turismo 3, Gran Turismo 4. You had Need for Speed Most Wanted, which came out in 2005. You had Race Driver Grid from 2008. You had Mario Kart Wii from 2008. You had, F Zero GX. You had Outrun 2, and you also had Mario Kart Double Dash. All those games came out in 2003. Some of the biggest and most popular racing games came from 2003, and I believe that was the same decade that the Forza Motorsport series had began. And then you also had, the Project Gotham along with the Forza Motorsport series, like I just mentioned. Those series basically all began in the 2000s. Now, the Project Gotham series was more popular between 2001 and 2007, and we haven't really seen or heard anything from, I guess, that series since then. And as far as Forza Motorsport is concerned, pretty much that series is still ongoing to this day. In fact, as far as the Forza series is concerned, it's been split into two, and now you got the Forza Horizon series, and then Forza Horizon 4, which came out back in 2018. That's a game that a lot of people say is probably the best installment within the entire series in general. But at the same time, the series would not have gotten as far as it did if it didn't become as popular as it did from in the 2000s. So you look at like the games that were very popular back in the day, and you look at the numbers they did in terms of sales. I mean, you're not going to see numbers like that ever again on any type of video games because, as you all know, a lot of people are starting to go more into, or they're starting to turn more into mobile gaming and PC gaming. So you're never going to see people, buy over 10 million copies of certain games for specific consoles, because at this point people are getting sick of video game consoles in general because they're very expensive. Not that people still wouldn't buy it and still wouldn't play them, but it's at a point now where we're not going to see numbers like that. And basically, as far as like the best-selling racing game of the 2000s is concerned, in fact, this might be the best-selling racing game of all time. It turns out that Mario Kart Wii from 2008 has sold 37 million copies worldwide since its release, and I didn't know that until a couple of days ago. And at the same time, it doesn't really surprise me considering how insanely popular the Wii console was at the time. And even though the Wii console was probably Nintendo's most successful video game console of all time, it definitely wasn't their most iconic game console. A lot of people would say their most iconic game console was either the NES or the Super Nintendo from either the 80s or the 90s. And as far as the racing genre is concerned, it's safe to say that the genre itself has evolved greatly since the racing games, arcade racing games from the 80s and the 90s. You had games like Outrun, Ridge Racer, Scud Racer, Crazy Taxi, games that are all gimmicky, and at the same time they appealed to casual gamers. We had a couple of games like that in the 2000s, but it seemed like the 2000s decade was basically I guess, there was more realism in racing games. There was more, basically purchasing cars and pretty much unlocking items and customizing your vehicle and completing career modes and stuff like that. It seemed like that became more and more popular within racing games in the 2000s, and that was something that was pretty cool to see. And as far as whether or not the 2000s was like the best, some of the best racing games of all time came from that decade. It really depends on who you ask, because you look at the racing games that came out in the teens decade, obviously the visuals are a lot better. You have optimal visuals, better gameplay, and all that stuff, features to make, racing games seem more realistic. But at the same time, you wouldn't be able to convince me that there are, many top racing titles from the 2000s that if they were remastered and re-released today, a lot of the current generation gamers would go crazy and probably play those games and wish that they played them or they were around when they were younger or when it was popular in the 2000s. So as far as the 2000s being the golden era of the racing genre, that's definitely something that has a degree of truth to it. But is it something that's undisputed? I mean, who knows?